Greetings everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It is I, zTeMpLaRz, and today we're going to be talking about a few tips I've picked up along my path and journey playing as an Oathkeeper Paladin. So come on in, get relaxed, and let's talk a few minutes about the experience that I've had over this last almost year on my Paladin playing as the healer main. The first thing we're going to take a look at is setting up your powers. And that's going to be your at-wills, your encounters, your dailies, and your class features. The first thing we want to do is, at least for me, the two I'm using, Valorous Strike for the melee hit, and Cure Wounds for a low cost, pretty decent magnitude heal, and we'll see why that magnitude goes up as we look further into the feats, but we'll get to that in a second. These are the two that I use for my Paladin. For the encounter powers, we're going with Sacred Weapon for increased divinity regeneration, primary heal, divine shelter. It's a good AoE that grants divine barrier. And then we're also going with Circle of Divinity that grants outgoing healing and restores divinity by 15%. Dailies, looking at Divine Judgment, just in case for whatever reason I don't really need to do much healing. I can drop a pretty high magnitude damage hit, and Lay on Hands is the nice backup emergency heal that will immediately heal anybody back to full and grant a relatively powerful divine barrier. So you can hold on to that if you're in an intensive healing fight. Hold on to it to max somebody out, whether it be the tank or somebody else, to make sure they're going to live. For the class features, I went with, of course, 10% faster divinity regeneration. Just because for the Paladin, at least in my experience, you can burn your divinity pretty quickly if you're not careful. And then I'm using Aura of Life just because I just, personal preference, I like the little bonus healing numbers. Another good option would obviously be Aura of Restoration, increasing incoming healing to yourself, nearby allies, and an additional 2% on the Aura of Divinity person. So those are the little powers, the tips. I've experimented with a lot of these, and the combination that I came up with is what I'm using now. Some of these others just too high of cooldowns. You know, a single target heal that removes a negative effect doesn't really do much for you. And then AoE stun. My opinion, your primary focus should be healing. Tanks and DPS should have plenty of CCs, but again, super high cooldowns kind of kills it. The next tip we're going to look at is going to be setting up your feats. And just remember, a lot of this stuff is just for beginners. Expert, higher tier players might go different directions. We're not going to be looking at gear or anything like that. This is just strictly tips that I've just learned along the way. So the first feat, Sheltered Healing. This is the one that actually grants Cure Wounds, such a high magnitude heal. Whenever somebody is affected by Divine Barrier, you grants an additional 150 magnitude. And then if you look at what my Cure Wounds is, the enhanced heal magnitude of 650 for 40 divinity costs is pretty decent. That is a very easy way to top people off. Very quick way to heal your team up and keep them healed, because your Divine Shelter is only granting 265 magnitude heal. So that you can spend multiple heals trying to heal people up when Cure Wounds can do the job for you. The next thing we're looking at is Battle Focus. Whenever you deal damage to an enemy, your divinity regeneration rate is increased. This is another personal preference for me, just because I like to play my Paladin as more of a combat healer. So I do get in the mix of things using melee attacks. That's why I like to carry around Divine Judgment. But it's just the way I play it. You could also probably sit back and launch Divine Fulminations just to get the regeneration rate increased. But everything that I do on my Paladin, I'm always trying to make sure my divinity is constantly regenerating. Whether that's through dealing damage, whether that's through 10% bonus here, whether that's through Sacred Weapon, whatever it is. But once you get Sacred Weapon and you're dealing damage, you got the 10% bonus there, you got your rune down, your circle down, all of that divinity is going to increase. That's going to regenerate pretty quickly. That's going to help you keep your heals up. Here's another one. Sacred Weapon now reduces damage taken by 10% and restores divinity over time. That's what grants the bonus here. So you added effect, decreased damage taken, and divine regeneration. So you got to get Enduring Spirit. Next we got Divine Intervention. This is going along with Lay on Hands. Grants you a Divine Barrier. Absorbs damage equal to half the amount of hit points healed. So whenever you heal somebody, you're healing them for max. So they're basically going to get 50% of their health points. And the reason, this was on my radar as a tip, because when I first started out, I inadvertently chose Feats that did not match up with the powers that I was using, and I had to go back and change these up. Because again, I was experimenting. I was, a beginner player. I had not played the game before, so I was just picking stuff and choosing them. This is more tips in order for you to not have to go through that, and you can set your Paladin up to actually be effective early on and not have to constantly retrain your powers. The next tip would be turning on player health bars. So whenever you're in a team, let's see if I can find somebody real quick. Protector's Enclave. Totally devoid of people. Okay, so you can see this player's health bar over his head is always on. I think the default option when you start the game is that those are turned off only unless you're focused on the player. So if you go to your options, show player life is defaulted to only when targeted. So when you're running around and you're fighting in a dungeon or whatever, you can't see. You can only see their player health on the left-hand side where everybody's name shows up, and you can't see it unless you're targeting them. Sometimes it can be difficult to locate somebody on the battlefield to start, especially if you're going to single target heal them with Cure Wounds instead of just spamming AoEs to try to heal them up. When I switched over and started using the health plates, it significantly increased my efficiency as a healer, because I could instantly see where that person's health bar was and where they were at on the battlefield, turn and start healing them. It made a pretty big difference, pretty big impact. It makes healing a lot easier, especially on console, which I am playing on. PC, I'm not sure, but yeah, keep it always on. It does clog up your UI a little bit, but in order to keep your team alive, you got to do what you got to do. The next thing we're looking at, pretty simple. Don't spam your heals unless you have to. And that's primarily your divinity. So I've set it up to where the only healing ability that I have that really costs anything is Divine Shelter, 120 cost. Your Cure Wounds is only 40. Your Aura of Divinity heal is 140 at max. So you can get small heals off that cost very little, but they're going to heal very little as well. But that's probably going to be on your tank most of the time, and you're going to charge that pretty high. It's not really a spell that you can spam that's going to cause any problems. But don't spam your heals unless you have to. Let your shields do their job. Single target focus with your cure wounds to get people healed back up. That's just the way that I do it. And like I said, it's been very effective. Very effective. And the last thing, the last tip that I would give to a beginner Oathkeeper Paladin would be utilize combo heals. And that basically means when you heal somebody, especially if you're not healing them to full, when you hit with a divine shelter, immediately follow it up with a cure wounds, because you're going to get the bonus, the enhanced heal of 650 magnitude, right behind a 265. And those can be some very easily can heal somebody to full health instantly. I've seen I've gotten 500,000 healing back to back from a divine shelter and cure wounds. So utilize combo heals. You can do the same thing with your Aura of Divinity. If that happens to be, if that's on somebody, you can, especially if you go max, boom, and then follow it up with the cure wounds. Even if you don't go max, follow it up with the cure wounds. Cure wounds is so cheap, but has such a good, decent magnitude heal. It doesn't make sense to not follow up your heals with the cure wounds. The only thing is you got to make sure you're focused on them. The other thing with cure wounds that I've noticed that it does is that when you hold the button down, your character will spam it, but it also does like a soft lock on where your cursor will stay on that person, whomever you're healing, and whether they're moving or not, and you'll stay with them. So it's something worth paying attention to. That'll help you out completely. But those are the 5 tips that I came up with. Just wanted to share them with you. Hopefully it helps somebody else that maybe was thinking about making an Oathkeeper Paladin or is in the process of starting an Oathkeeper Paladin. Utilize those tips. I think they'll help you out a lot. If anybody else has any tips for beginner Paladin healers, leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much, everybody, for clicking on the video and listening to what old zTeMpLaRz got to say. Hopefully we'll catch you in the stream sometime. But until then, I'm out.